Hello. On behalf of the Massachusetts Breast Cancer Coalition, I would like to welcome you to today's webinar, Secrets of Athletic Goal Achievement. My name is Michelle Dixon, and I am the Program and Development Coordinator for Mass Breast Cancer Coalition, and I'm very pleased you could join us this afternoon. I would like to introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Kathy Utzschneider. Dr. Utzschneider is a lead faculty for Boston College Sports Leadership, where she has been teaching for the past 10 years. In 1992, she founded MOVE, a coaching and training practice for both runners and swimmers. In addition to being an accomplished master's athlete herself, Kathy is also the author of 2 books, MOVE, How Women Can Achieve Athletic Goals at Any Age, and Mastering Running. Kathy is a recognized expert in the study of goal achievement, and we are very pleased she could join us today. Kathy, welcome.
Thank you, Michelle. And thanks everybody for being on this webinar. And look forward to talking about a topic that's dear to my heart and answering any of your questions. So the topic today is Secrets of Athletic Goal Achievement. And one thing that I've noticed, one of the reasons I pick a title like this is that it surprised me in my more than 10 years of teaching coaches and college Division I team captains and athletes. It struck me that none of them understand how to set and achieve athletic goals outside an organized setting of school or high school or college. It's very challenging once we're on our own and balancing many obligations and interests and so forth. So this is the topic of the talk today, and it's based on more than 20 years of academic research, clinical work with athletes and non-recreational athletes, beginners, all levels, on my own experience and on many interviews and writing. So let's go forward here. So why focus on athletic goals? I like this cartoon here, Beating Overwhelm. I don't know if any of you have read Dan Levitin's book, but it's excellent, The Organized Mind. The reason to focus on athletic goals is that, our lives are as chaotic as they ever were. We balance more things than we ever did. And Dan Levitin calls this the age of information overload. He says we balance more tasks and information than we ever did before. I love the quote he writes in his introduction, we feel we're running fast just to stand still. And if you just think about how much information we're all processing, more information today, even at the grocery store, how many more kinds of juice can we buy today than we could buy 20 years ago? How many kinds of ice cream? How many more vegetables are out there than we used to be able to buy? But all this challenges us to focus on what's most important to us. So with all this information overload, it's all the more important that we have some kind of anchor in our lives. And that's what athletic goals do. They help us achieve optimal performance by building structure into our lives. In a national public radio interview a few months ago, I said this, and I think it is powerful. I said, goals force us to think deliberately. By that I mean, if you set a goal in an area of your life, you have to think about everything going on in it. So, what I thought I'd do today is just simply present a method that's written about in my book, MOVE, and thoughts that you can implement to achieve athletic goals, to achieve your athletic goals, whether you are a sheer beginner, you're afraid of them, or you've been achieving athletic goals all your life. And I encourage you, as I'm talking through these slides, note down any questions you have, anything that might be unclear, or any additional questions you have as we go along. So in MOVE, it's called MOVE, How Women Achieve Athletic Goals at Any Age. In MOVE, a method is explained for achieving athletic goals that anyone can use. And again, it's based on research, academic research, coaching, writing, and my own experience. I do coach individual women, individuals, and then I coach groups of women, pairs, groups of 4, groups of 20, and so forth. So some of the secrets, what I call secrets, will sound familiar, and others will be new. But they're all secrets. They're all essential to achieving athletic goals. So let's go on to the next slide. So secret number 1, athletic goals start with fantasizing, with dreams. So ask yourself, what's your vision of yourself? Who would you ideally like to be? What achievements have meaning for you? To dream, think about others whom you admire. What have they accomplished? Or think about your childhood. What were you unable to do then? What didn't you have a chance to do that you are able to attempt now? Or what didn't you finish then that you'd like to finish now? I remember a client who was actually a doctor, and took us quite a number of weeks to figure out what goal she really wanted, and it turned out to be a swimming goal. And the reason that the goal of swimming had meaning for her is she lost her father suddenly when she was about 7 years old, and he was teaching her to swim. And it was so traumatic when she lost her father that she said, and it took so much thought because she kept thinking about, oh, running a marathon or doing a hike or doing what other people wanted to do. It took a lot of actual soul searching for her to think, what's important to her? So back to our slide, the third paragraph, everyone's life is interrupted over and over again. And dreaming is the start of beginning again. A dream, a vision of a meaningful goal will launch you on a mission that's more important than just any activity. You really want to feel that you're on a mission, and a dream helps you start that. And a dream and a mission have everything to do with your ability to commit through hardship. Next slide. So build your dream by writing a vision statement. And many of you are probably familiar with a vision statement. Maybe you aren't, but many of you may be. It's a one-sentence statement that reflects how you want to see yourself, even if you don't believe the statement yet. You may laugh when you write it. Like, for example, say none of us are windsurfers. Maybe some of you are. We say, we have the dream, the passion of being a great windsurfer. A vision statement would be, I love to windsurf, and I do it easily. It's a statement that you would laugh at because you'd say, oh, I know that's not true. It's ridiculous. But it helps you get started. Make your first phone call to get a windsurfing lesson. And I'm choosing a rather extreme sport, but extreme sport in that it's not as accessible to many people. But that's the point. You want to write a statement that you don't necessarily believe now. And then you want to frame it so you can make it important, put it in a place where you see it every day. Think about it every day, your desk, your bathroom, your refrigerator, etc. So a good phrase is dream it, speak it, write it, believe it. Athletes have visions. All of them do. What is yours? I'm a strong woman who can easily run 6.2 miles might be one vision statement. I'm just thinking about the Hopkinton event coming up on June 18th. I don't know whether you're thinking about running a 5K or a 10K or doing the kayak or the swim, but just do it and write a vision statement related to it. So next slide, moving from dreams to reality, research has shown that too much focus on athletic goals and too little on the rest of life leads to failure. People achieve athletic goals when they have a balanced perspective on their responsibilities, when they remember the big picture, everything going on in the rest of their lives. In my doctoral program, I spent 7 years researching, comparing women runners who started running when they were in their teens with those who started running after 30. And I had a sample of 103 women runners who, at the time of the research, they were all over 40. And they said, that the biggest obstacles to achieving athletic goals, were not injury, it was not boredom, it was not the challenge of training or pain, but too many responsibilities. And I'm imagining that probably, resonates with all of you. And then, it also harks back to Dan Levitin's comment that we are inundated with more social media messages and more choices and more, so many more choices in terms of how to spend our time and what to buy, that putting some blinders on and limiting our choices actually helps us achieve our most important goals. So how do we do that? Well, oh dear, I'm sorry. Turn this off. Remember that setting goals is not the first step in goal achievement. Preparing for goals and planning ahead is. We have to, particularly when we're juggling all these many things going on in our lives. It's a step that most people who start by setting goals forget. I remember being on a plane coming back from happened to be a world championship, and I sat next to a woman who'd just gotten her doctorate. She was going to her commencement in neuropsychology, and she said, "Oh, preparing for goals? I never thought of that. I thought you just set them." That's the problem. People forget all the time. Before you even think about setting a goal, get out a calendar. You see this calendar, there's a calendar on your right with different categories of information. Think about everything that's coming up in your life. Think about graduations, it's that season. Think about work deadlines, your vacations. Write them all down before you even decide what physical goal you're going to focus on. It's those other goals that get in the way of your athletic goal achievement more than anything else. Next, so if you are thinking about the kayak, swim, run, or aquathlon at Hopkinton, you can prepare by, as I just suggested, write down everything that's going on in your life. Write it on the calendar so you can look at it. Get everything you need to participate now. Don't wait. And start thinking now about the logistics of the day or the weekend, because all of those things are going to remove, what I say, it's going to remove debris on your radar screen. You want all logistics covered, out of the way. Considered would be a better word. Secret number 3, whether you're a beginner or experienced athlete, entering an event with a beginner's mind is essential. And I think that's an attitude of openness, enthusiasm, and of no judgment. So you're not concerned with the outcome. And I'm sure when you think about areas in which you are accomplished or areas that you have experimented in, having a non-judgmental mind, having just an attitude of fun is just, it's the way you get there. No pressure at all. So just give yourself credit for participating. being there and trying is much more important than finishing. Entering is a win. I said earlier, think of the areas in which you've excelled. How did you start? There's research by a very now popular, many books have been written about his theory, professor of psychology at the University of Florida, Tallahassee, Dr. K. Anders Ericsson, and he is an expert on expertise. And experimenting, having a beginner's mind is critical, is the critical first step to becoming an expert in anything. Because whether or not you have talent, that's another question, but any expert has spent 10 years or 10,000 hours becoming, practicing, getting good in their area. And that doesn't start without an initial whim, W-H-I-M, which is a W-I-N. So get ready for an upside down perspective on this one. There you have 3 of my beginner runners. Milica, actually, she's from Serbia, is on the right-hand side, and she's holding the watch. This is the first time she's running. So she started by running 15 seconds at a time with a 45-second walk recovery. And when she entered her first 5K, 3.1 miles, she walked half of it. But she loved it. You know, she just had a beginner's mind. It was fantastic, she said. I'm hooked. 6 months later, she got out just 3 times a week, remembering the 10 years, 10,000 hours to excellence. And she ran a 5K in 25:48. She had a beginner's mind. And I can't tell you how thrilled she is and how this has transformed her life. And by that I mean, I being someone who doesn't believe in generalizations without examples that support them. She's a mom with 2 young kids, and she used the MOVE method of mine not only to start running in a very unpressured way, she also used it to re-enter the workforce. And now she has a great job that she's always wanted in public health. So, and if you're nervous because you're experimenting, obviously you are normal. Here's an acronym that helps my athletes. I use it all the time. My son just told me how helpful it was for him in his first presentation at work. ETU, embrace the uncomfortable. It works for many things you don't feel like doing. I've just become a swimmer in the last 2 years. I taught swimming years ago. Maybe the last year and a half I've become a swimmer. But I use that phrase every time I go to the pool in the winter, because the last thing, and we've had some, because not this past winter, but the winter before, freezing cold, last thing I feel like doing is on a cold day in a cold car driving over to the pool, anticipating, getting into the cold locker and cold shower and then the cold pool before it's, 5 minutes before I'm warm again. There's something incredibly powerful about embrace the uncomfortable. Everybody, all my athletes love that phrase, because we keep thinking that life should be easy, that we should sort of avoid the uncomfortable, but actually it's the reverse. And if you say that to yourself, merely saying it to yourself will help you move towards the uncomfortable. And even that phrase, embrace the uncomfortable, should help you get out the door. Secret number 4. Write down your goals where you can see them daily. Well, that's probably not much of a secret, you know that. But people don't do it. And people usually, and here's the nuance here, they let an app own their goals. Don't do that. Write them down so that you can see them every day. You will own them more, your goals, and that's really important. In fact, Dan Levitin says in the book about the called The Organized Mind, he says that when we write things down with our fingers, we take them in. We incorporate our beliefs more intrinsically. And so that's the reason to get out a piece of paper and write them down. Get out an old-fashioned training book. You can use Training Peaks or other computer-generated tracking systems, but also write down your goals on paper. My clients use what I call a move goal pyramid, and I have a copy of one in the next slide, and they put it where they can see it every day. So why a pyramid? Well, because research actually shows that we remember images 1.5 times or 150% more than we remember just words. Track your daily training in a calendar as well. Otherwise, guaranteed, 3 days later, you will forget what you've done. One thing I do with athletes is I have once-a-week meetings, and they have 15-minute call-ins where I track their athletic goals. We use Google Calendars, and they track them too. So they write them down on a piece of paper, but they have a calendar, and we're working with them together every week just for a little bit, and it keeps them remembering because we always forget. So here's a Move Goal calendar. So at the very bottom, this slide actually I've cut off 2 things, which has the date and then the baseline where you're starting from. That is, this person wants to run the Tufts 10K in October in less than 50 minutes. And what's at the bottom here is that her baseline is that she now can run, she runs 6 miles a week, 2 miles 3 days a week. So what she's going, the most important task is in the bottom stripe, and her bottom task is to build in 10% increments, per week. She wants to build to running 25 to 28 miles a week in 4 runs with 1 long run of 7 miles. Now, right now, her long run, I think, is 3 miles. So she's starting, but gradually she will build up. Then 4 times a week, she's going to do 10 to 20 push-ups and 3 by 130-second planks, 1.5 minute planks, 2 to 20 to 30 squats, and 20 to 30 dips. Now, everyone's pyramid is different. I have a woman in her 70s. Her goals will be much more modest. I also have a world record holder in her 70s. Hers will be more aggressive. It doesn't matter what your age. It matters we start from where you as the athlete are. And you can do a goal pyramid for your Hopkinton event. 3rd stripe, say, embrace the uncomfortable every time I go out for a run. Then drink 64 ounces of water a day, stretch for 10 minutes after each run, and finally her outcome goal at the very top her performance goal is to run the Tufts 10K in less than 50 minutes. And just having this in front of her is a powerful reminder of what she has to do, so she can see it every time. All right. Secret number 5, it doesn't matter where you record your weekly training, but record it somewhere. In a Google Doc, Training Peaks, or an old-fashioned calendar. Make sure your log shows a week at a time. And remember what I said earlier, the old-fashioned calendar is really the best. And my athletes, they keep, and I call an athlete anyone, even a walker, it doesn't matter. Anyone who's trying to get better, faster, stronger. If you currently keep your records in a Training Peaks, whatever, make sure you write it down. If you don't write down your training, you will forget. And also your logbook will become, this is critical, your training Bible for future events. This is a resource you can refer to regarding what worked and what didn't. This is something that the college athletic team coaches are now using. They've incorporated these training forms for their athletes so that when later on their athletes can see, what did they do to prepare for such and such an event? And of course all my athletes use them too. Here's Rebecca Breslow. She's training for a race here. And I just included this slide because it shows how detailed she keeps her training records. And actually, I just pulled out 2 pages. Some days, when she was running in the wintertime, she was running through the woods or snowshoeing, and she'd take a photo, beautiful photograph of the woods in the snow with the light coming through the trees. Just beautiful. So here she's run 6 miles. She's a competitive runner. These are meant not to scare anybody, but just to let you know how detailed. She's saying here she ran lap 1 in 6 minutes and 28 seconds. And PE means perceived exertion. I work, and that means a perceived exertion of comfortably hard. So it felt comfortably hard for her to do this lap, and it's a lap around a reservoir that's about a mile. And perceived exertion of 8 is hard, and perceived exertion 8.5 is between hard and very hard. But some people train at a perceived exertion of 3, which is easier than easy. And she says she had an issue with her knee, so she said left knee holding steady at 0.5 to 5 on a scale of on a scale of 1 to 5. So she had a little awareness. It wasn't even 1. 5 is the greatest pain. You'd go to the hospital for it. So she's got a little awareness, 0.5 on a scale of 0 to 5. Kept the pace very easy. Run went fine. Though I'm aware it's not solid. Like it's been over the past few weeks, it isn't painful, and it wasn't limiting at all during or after the run. Then May, the next day, 6 miles, she recovered well, no problem. So that just gives you an idea of the detail that helps. Then secret number 6, an objective review of your event after it's over is critical for your long-term success. So a review becomes a resource, a building block on which you can base future training programs. Now, this post-event analysis is something that if you are doing any of the Hopkinton events, I highly recommend that you do after you are finished with it. And that post-event analysis is in both of my books, Move and Mastering Running. Those books are on Amazon. You can find them if you Google my name on Amazon. Anyway. So most of my athletes complete a Move post-event analysis with questions like these, and this is after your event is over, so you don't forget. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 representing most and 1 representing least, how would you rate your physical readiness, your mental readiness? Are there any particular circumstances related to the day of the event, logistics, weather, heat, humidity, cold, etc.? Heat's a very important thing to note at this time of year. Wind, too. When did you start training for this event, and how many weeks of training does that represent? Summarize your weekly strength training and stretch routine. Include yoga, Pilates, or another class. And then this question, too, which you will already have considered, in your planning, preparing for goals phase. What other life events, work, personal life, etc., have affected, helped, or hindered your training? Finally, no matter what your outcome, celebrate your adventure with your friends and family. People so often miss this step, and it's important because a celebration reinforces your step to transforming your self-concept to how you see yourself. Secret number 8. This is one of the most requested diagrams from my research in journals and magazines. And most important, remember, it is never too late to be your best. I've written the only doctoral dissertation in the world comparing open and masters athletes, those who started in their teens with those who started after 30 to 40, to see how those who start later can catch up to those who started earlier. In a sport like running, which is particularly distance running, which is a fairly low skill sport, even when I say distance, it's anything from the half mile up to the marathon, a 400-meter being a sprint. Even if you start, there were some people who started even after 60, which this diagram doesn't show. Given the same amount of talent, someone could catch up, be just as fast after 10 years if they started at 60, at 70, as someone who was on the Olympic team who started at 15 and was in the Olympics at 25, given the same level of talent, it is never too late to catch up. Now, how does that apply to other sports? It's harder in other sports which require more skill. However, there have been many. One of my friends is a world record-holding swimmer, and she did not start swimming until she was 25, 26. And even with skill sports, it's never too late to be your best. I've seen some people start playing tennis, which is a pretty intensively skill-oriented sport, and be as good after about 10 to 15 years of playing as some Division III college athletes. So keep this one in mind, regardless of your age. Finally, what are you waiting for? Why put off until tomorrow a chance to jump into something now? Now we have time to hear your questions. Oh, sorry about that.
Well, Kathy, thank you. I'm going to start us off because I have a question regarding how do you combat expectation? I loved your phrase of going into things with a beginner's mind. But if you have been, and I'll take myself as an example, if I've been running for a while, how do you not go into a training cycle or a race without too many expectations?
Can you clarify that, make that a little more specific, which is a typical response of mine in a classroom setting? Can you be very specific on that question?
Sure. I mean, particularly in a case of if you've done a race before, you know what your time was or what went well or didn't go well, and that to me is always in the back of your mind somewhere. So what tips do you have to let go of that so you really can approach something as a beginner?
Well, a number of things. One is you won't have a post-goal analysis for your earlier experience, but is to think about that experience and to say, write down what went into that earlier memory, that earlier experience. For how long was I training? What did I do? And that in itself will give you some objective data, which you can then, and how old was I at the time? And then when you come into your next run, you say, what am I doing now? What have I done now? And how many miles am I running? And then what is reasonable to expect given that my training might be very different? Just because you did something before doesn't mean that, let's say you ran a 5K in 25 minutes or 28 minutes or whatever, and you say, well, I did it before years ago, and how am I going to do this next event if I'm not going to do it? I know I can't do it. You say this to yourself. Number one, you say, this is a step, again, to getting better and faster than I was in my earlier experience. But it's just a step. Remember, the 10 years, 10,000 hours, because it's the people who do really well in training are people who are moderate in their training. They're consistent, and they're committed, but they're moderate. And they remember the 10 years, 10,000 hours, so they know when they're entering an event, and they haven't for a long time, they're coming in with a realistic expectation, but they know they're going to be back there with more training. Does that answer the question?
That does. That was great. Thank you. I invite anyone who's on the call now to please feel free to type in your questions, and I will share them with Kathy.
Okay.
Kathy, I have one for you on vision statements.
Sure.
And how do you craft a vision statement without getting caught up in self-editing?
Okay. So, my question would be, and I think someone just wrote that down, without self-editing. I'm not sure exactly what the person means by self-editing. I can imagine that it's what typically happens when someone writes a vision statement, as I suggested before, is, for example, I will write down, let's say, I just started swimming, and I'm going to swim a mile in 28 minutes. And then I say to myself, oh my gosh, I know I can't do that. I can't do that. But I'm going to keep my dream as 28 minutes, and then even though it's not believable, and I may not be able to swim a mile in 28 minutes for 4 years, I'm going to keep that until I find a vision statement that's somewhat realistic. So by that I mean you have to write down a dream that may not be realistic at all, but then with time and training you have a greater sense of what is realistic, and then you change your vision statement to say something that's a little bit more manageable, like I'm going to swim a mile in 29 minutes and 30 seconds, something like that. So you can edit your vision statement. Does that help?
Great. I think it does. Great. Thank you. We still have time if there are other questions that you want to submit.
I wonder how many of those in the audience are, who's doing the kayak, who's doing the swim, who's doing the run, whether any of you will be there, well, for yourselves or for family members or friends. But it should be a great event. I was just swimming in Walden Pond a few weeks ago, and it was just beautiful. But I know Walden Pond is in Hopkinton, but the water is warm. So.
Well, we're keeping our fingers crossed for a beautiful day. We've been lucky the last couple of years with the weather.
It's been great.
Okay, well,
just great.
If there are not any other questions at this time, I would like to thank you, Kathy, so much for this, and say to everyone who attended today, on behalf of Cheryl Osimo, our Executive Director, and the Massachusetts Breast Cancer Coalition's Board of Directors, I want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon. And again, Kathy, a special thank you to you.
You're very welcome. Great to talk with everybody or talk about the topic, and have a great day and all the best for the 18th.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay. All right.
Bye-bye.
Michelle. Bye.